You're listening to Beyond the Plate with Andrew Kaplan. That sounds so weird. You're listening to Beyond the Plate with Cappy.
Hey everyone, this is Cappy, and you're listening to Just the Plate, a production of Beyond the Plate. Just the Plate is a short segment where chefs describe a recipe, sharing insider tips and tricks on what makes this their favorite dish. Last week, we heard from Gail Simmons of Top Chef fame. But she is so much more than that. She's a food writer. Yes, she's a television personality on Top Chef. She happens to be one of the kindest, well-spoken, nicest people that I know. She uses her voice for good. As she said last episode, she's an eater, she's a writer, she's a traveler, and she's a cook. If you missed last week's episode with Gail, please be sure to check that out. In this episode, Gail shares a recipe from her new cookbook, Bringing It Home. Gail has traveled the world through her work with Top Chef and other work and created a cookbook that happens to be one of the most beautiful books that I've seen in a long time, and I'm super excited to cook my way through it. But I'll stop talking because you're going to hear a recipe straight from her, so please enjoy this episode of Just the Plate.
Hi, my name's Gail Simmons. I am the Special Projects Director at Food & Wine. I'm a judge on Bravo's Top Chef. I'm a mom, I'm a cook, I'm an eater, a writer, a traveler, and I love food. Today, I'm going to make a rustic fish soup with fennel and orange. I chose this recipe because it's one of my favorite, really simple but impressive dishes for entertaining when I'm with family and friends at home. It's really easy to make. You can make almost all of it in advance in terms of the base of the soup, and then all you have to do when your guests arrive is bring it to a very low simmer, put the fish in, it cooks for about 2 minutes, and you're done. Garnish it, serve it with a big salad, a glass of wine, some crusty bread. You can even make buttery garlic toasts to go with it, and it's the perfect dinner. The recipe can be found in my new cookbook, Bringing It Home, favorite recipes from A Life of Adventurous Eating, and I hope you love it as much as I do. So you want to start with a 6 to 8 quart Dutch oven or really heavy bottomed pot. Make sure it has a lid. I love my sort of enameled cast iron pot because I find that it is a workhorse in the kitchen and it's a great pot to use for something like this. Heat a little bit of oil. You can use extra virgin oil or canola oil, but let's start with extra virgin olive oil because this fish soup obviously has flavors from the Mediterranean, and I think extra virgin olive oil is the way to go when you're cooking with all of those fresh, light flavors. So about 3 tablespoons can go into the Dutch oven over medium heat, and then you're going to add some coarsely chopped fennel. You want to cut the fennel and chop it up very roughly, but reserve the fennel fronds, those long, green, furry pieces that come at the top of the fennel. Cut them off and reserve them, put them aside, and chop them finely for later because they make a beautiful garnish and they have a lot of flavor. So you want to add your fennel, add some chopped onion, some chopped celery, and a little bit of garlic that's also been really finely chopped, about 3 cloves. Be generous with the garlic because it really helps create that layer of flavor at the base of your soup. Cook all the vegetables together, stirring occasionally until they start to soften, about 5 minutes. You don't want to get color at this stage. You're not looking to caramelize everything heavily. So you want to make sure that your heat is on medium as opposed to scorching them at really high heat. You don't need to do that because then you could burn them, especially the garlic, and it takes on a bitter flavor. This is more about gentle cooking. After that, add a little bit of wine, about a half a cup of dry white wine, or even better, if you have Pernod, which has a little bit of an anise flavor to it, lying around the house, which you may or may not, probably not, but in case you do, use Pernod instead because it has that fennel-y anise flavor. It goes really well with the flavor of the fennel, and I think it's a great accent to the fish and to the soup in general. Cook out the wine or Pernod until the liquid is almost evaporated. So you're reducing it down so that the alcohol burns off and you're just left with that flavor that adds a lot to the soup. And from there, you're going to stir in 3 bottles of clam juice, 8-ounce bottles. Now, this may sound strange. You can also use fish stock if you happen to have some, but I find fish stock people usually don't have lying around their house. And when they want it is when they never have it. And it can be hard to find really good quality fish stock, certainly in grocery stores, unless you go to your fishmonger. So I keep clam juice on hand as a really good fast substitute. Pour in the clam juice and then pour in a whole can of whole peeled tomatoes. You don't need to buy the crushed kind. Include the juices, put the whole can in, and then use a wooden spoon to break up the tomatoes. Or if you want, you can even put the tomatoes into a bowl before you put them in the pot and crush them by hand before putting them into the pot with the clam juice and all of those vegetables. Then, once you've stirred that around a bit, you're going to add a little bit of thyme, some orange zest, some chili flakes, and then season with salt. Give that a big stir and add about 1.5 cups to 2 cups of water as well to make sure that all the vegetables are covered and you have sort of a thin, nice soupy liquid. Bring that whole thing to a boil, then turn it down, reduce it to a simmer, and cover your pot partially so that steam is still getting out. It's still evaporating and reducing a little bit, but you want to start simmering it to thicken it up. That will also make sure that all the flavors come together. It's well balanced and blended, but you don't want to let it go for very long. You want to thicken it slightly, but you don't want it to be a super thick stew. This is really a soup. That should take about 25 minutes, but keep an eye on it so that it stays at that low simmer. You don't need it to come to a vigorous boil again. Once it's reduced a little bit and thickened, remove the thyme sprigs. If you didn't put in picked thyme leaves and you put in whole sprigs, which is fine, just make sure to take them out at this point. Very important because you don't want your guests choking on those coarse sprigs. And then at this point, if you want to do this in advance, take it off the heat, let it come to room temperature, and then you can even put it in the fridge for a day, up to 2 days if you want to. And then all you need to do is finish it when you're ready to serve it. So if you don't cool it off, at this point, all you need to do is add your fish. I like to use about 2 pounds of any firm white fish that's really fresh at the market. Halibut works well, cod, red snapper, tilapia, anything that when you go to your fishmonger, I think looks the best and is a firm, white, flaky fish. Add the fish. You should chop it, by the way. Cut it into cubes about 1 or 2 inches in size. Add it all to the pot that's at that gentle simmer with a few grinds of black pepper. Let it come back to a simmer because it will stop simmering when you add in that cold, fresh fish. And let it cook just till the fish is cooked through, which only takes about 2 or 3 minutes. You don't want to walk away from the pot at this point. Season it to make sure that it doesn't need any more salt. Sometimes you'll need to adjust the seasoning here a little bit, a little more salt, a little more pepper, and then your stew is done. When you're ready to serve it, I like to ladle it into bowls and top it with that fennel frond chopped up finely that you reserved earlier. You can also use some celery leaves if you had some celery leaves from the celery ribs that were put in earlier, and serve it warm. Another thing to do is to add some garlicky toast points to serve alongside it if you have time to make them while your soup is cooking or maybe before your guests arrive. And that can be the simplest thing ever. Slice some bread, a rustic loaf of some kind, or even a baguette, and make a little bit of a very quick compound butter. So heat butter and melt it over very low heat in a saucepan. You can use, a 1/4 cup of butter, let's say. Add some chopped or very thinly sliced garlic, some of those thyme leaves, and some salt, and let the butter melt with all those beautiful flavors. Simmer it just for 30 seconds or a minute to let everything come together. And then take that bread that you sliced and brush the bread with this delicious garlicky, herby butter mixture. Broil it in the broiler, under a broiler for 2 minutes to toast up the bread and serve it along with your soup. And that to me is one of the most perfect simple soups I can imagine. There it is.
Find more on Gail Simmons at gailsimmons.com. This episode was produced by Ian Cohen, Joel Yeaton, and myself. You can find me and keep up to date with this podcast across all social media platforms at On Cappy's Plate or go to beyondtheplatepodcast.com. Please rate, review, and or subscribe to this podcast on your listening site of choice. Thank you for listening to Just the Plate, a production of Beyond the Plate. I'm Cappy.